Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's technical mathematics lesson. My name is Matsiri Sokongwani. This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. Remember, grade 12, our WhatsApp number is 079-578-2908. You are more than welcome to send any clarity-seeking question pertaining technical mathematics onto that particular number. That is 079-578-2908. As we are approaching your prelim grade 12, we will be busy with the revision. Today we are looking at analytical geometry. we are going to look at the part that is the grade 11 part. Remember where we are talking the triangles and the polygons. Okay. And then after the completion of today's lesson, you will be able to determine the distance or length between 2 points. Secondly, the midpoint between 2 points, and then the gradient of a line segment connecting 2 points, the equation of a straight line passing through 2 points, an equation of a straight line passing through 1 point, of which it is also parallel or perpendicular to another line. And then the inclination of a line with the aid of a gradient m, where this inclination now lies between 0 and 180 degrees. What do we mean about that, grade 12? Remember, this is our 0 degrees line, the 90 degrees, the 180 degrees, and so forth. So now that means this inclination now can lie in this quadrant 1. That is why we are saying from 0 to 108, or it can be in the second quadrant there. That is what we mean about the inclination being between 0 and 180. Now, grade 12, as you can see now, as I was going through this objective, when you want distance, you need 2 points. When you want midpoint, you need 2 points. When you need a gradient of a line, you need 2 points. When you want an equation of a straight line, it is sometimes passing through 2 points there. So that means most of your activities, you will be relying on 2 points throughout this topic, grade 12. And then now you need to know your formulae that you will be applying, and then these formulae, some of them you'll find at the back of your question paper on your information sheet. And then you have a distance formula, and then this is written D to cover all the distances, and that is the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. That simply means, grade 12, if you are given 2 points, A and B, remember we work with 2 points, and then this is having the x and y value and another x and y value there. We simply mean that you can name this your x1, y1, and the x2 and the y2. And then you will be substituting those values. As you can see, you have x2 minus x1 and the y2 minus y1 there. And then also with the coordinates of the midpoint, be careful, grade 12 now. With the distance, you were subtracting the x2, x1, and the y2, y1. But with the coordinates of the midpoint now, we are now adding. So that is the mistake that you do, grade 12. You end up subtracting instead of adding. So now when you are looking at the coordinate of the midpoint, is x2 plus x1 over 2. We start with the x followed by y because we are talking coordinates. And then now you can even separate this in conditions where you are given the x mid. Now you need maybe to find one x there. Then you can separate them, not working inside the bracket as that one. Also with the y mid, you can separate if you are looking for a y value somewhere on your given information. And then now with the equation of a straight line, we have 2 originals that you can select from, but they work very well, both of them. You can have your y equal to mx plus c. Sometimes they use y is equal to ax plus q there. You must know that you are talking to the same equation. Or you can use the one that is saying y minus y1 is equal to m into x minus x1. And then now with this equation of a straight line, you can see that you have m there. That m represents a gradient. And then how do you calculate the gradient now? To calculate the gradient, you need y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Can you see it is also relying on 2 points, the application there. Now we have conditions, grade 12. When line AB is parallel to line CD, that means now the gradient of line AB is exactly equal to the gradient of line CD, where we are having what? The parallel lines going in the same direction, but they will never meet. And then another condition, if line EF is perpendicular to line GH, then the gradient of EF multiplied by the gradient of GH will give you -1. That means the product of the two gradients of the lines will give you a product of -1. That means it's where you have maybe lines like this, and then you have the line EF there, and then with your line GH there, and then they cut each other at 90 degrees. Then that is what we mean about perpendicular lines then. So the product of their gradient will be equal to -1. And then we have the angle of inclination. Angle of inclination, we are using the equation tan theta is equals to m, of which m is the gradient of the line of which this inclination line, where m is the slope or the gradient of a line. Remember, the gradient is the steepness or the slope of a line, okay? Depending whether it's an increasing or a decreasing line curves. And then now we are still on angle of inclination. Is an angle between a line and a positive x-axis grade 12. What do we mean about that? It means now it can be a line there. It's between the x-axis and the line. It can be also in the second quadrant. It is between the x-axis and the line. So inclination angle, we only consider an angle that is between your line x-axis and the straight line graph that we are talking to. So the gradient that you are taking, it will be the gradient of that line that we are using on that particular equation of an inclination. And then it lies only between 0 and 180. I've already indicated that is between 0 and 180. That means quadrants 1 and 2 only. We do not calculate inclination in quadrant 3 and 4 grade 12. The minute you see inclination, we only work in quadrant 1 and 2. And then it is measured anti-clockwise. Measured anti-clockwise starting from this side, anti-clockwise. We measure it in that direction, from here into that direction. That is the measure of the inclination angle. Okay. And then now here is your baseline assessment grade 12. Let's check what is the pre-knowledge or the knowledge that you have now up to this far on analytical geometry. Before we can do any activity, let's check how much you know. We are given the points A and B there, and then you need to answer those questions, grade 12. I am giving you 5 minutes to do this activity, and your 5 minutes, grade 12, starts now. Okay, grade 12, let's check how far did you go. Remember our WhatsApp number, 079-578-2908. Now, we are given the points A with coordinate 1 and -4, and point B with coordinate -2 and -7. And then now, it is better, grade 12, to have a little diagram, maybe to have a clarity of where do these two lines, points lie. The first one, we are having a 1 there, that is coordinating with -4. That means you have a point there, that is your A point. And then you have the B point, which is -2 and -7. So this is coordinating with -7. You have another point there. So now if we refer to this line, you can see that it's an increasing line that will go to that particular side, okay? Then you'll be having an angle of inclination between your X and the line, and you can see that angle will be less than 90 degrees. Now let's look at the question. We now understand the type of line that we are having. The first one, determine the length of a line segment AB. So now, since they say a length, the minute you see length or if you see distance, we are using the distance formula. And then now, because here we are given, remember original distance is written D is equal to the square root. But in this case, we must be specific because we are given a segment. So we'll say AB, line AB is equals to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus the y2 minus y1. Please ensure that your equation is correct, Rachels, before you do your substitution. And then we will name this the family of x1, y1. This one will be our x2 and the y2. And let's substitute now. And then x2 is -2 minus x1 is 1 squared plus y2 is -7 minus is the negative, the minus from the equation and the negative from our y1. Then this will cause this one to be +4. And then this is squared, everything into your square root, grade 12. And then now, after substituting, go straight into your calculator. Do not try to simplify partially. And then our answer will be 3 square root of 2, grade 12. I hope you get that one correct. 1 mark will be for substitution into the correct formula. Another mark will be for the answer. Therefore, this is 2 marks. And then question number 2, calculate the coordinate of the midpoint of AB. So we are looking at midpoint of AB. Remember, the midpoint formula says x2 plus x1 over 2, coordinating with y2 plus y1 over 2. And then we come to the substitution part now. We are still using the same x2 is -2 plus x1 is 1 all over 2. And then your y2 is -7 plus y1. y1 is negative, then it will be -4 over 2. Remember, this negatives comes with that 4. Our original equation is positive. So a positive times a negative will give us a negative. And then now grade 12 into your calculator to the answer. The first x coordinate value of AB will be -half. And then followed by the second one, which is -11 over 2. Those are the coordinates of the middle point of AB. Midpoint is for the middle point between 2 points, okay? And then now, number 3, calculate the gradient of a line AB. To calculate the gradient, look at the notation. Mid is mid AB. M is for gradient. MAB is a gradient now of AB. And then that will be the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now we substitute y2 -7, and then y1 is negative, so it will be minus plus 4 over x2 minus 2 and then x1, it will be minus 1 of x1. And then here you have the simplified answer into your calculator. This will give you a 1. So now with the coordinate grade 12, you'll get 1 mark for the method and 1 mark for your coordinators. It's 2 marks for the midpoint. Also for a gradient is 1 mark for substitution into the correct formula and 1 mark for your answer. That is also 2 marks. Number 4, hence calculate the angle of inclination of line AB. Now if you look at line AB, the inclination is less than 90 degrees. Okay, happy. We are taking the formula tan theta is equal to m, and then this is an inclination to that line that we have just calculated its gradient there. Then it will be tan theta. Substitute the gradient 1 from the previous, that is why it's saying hence here. And then now to find the theta, we are going to take tan to the side. It becomes arctan of 1. And then into your calculator, shift tangent, and then now 1 grade 12. This will give us a 45 degrees angle. Then our angle of inclination will be 45. It's 1 mark for substituting gradient and 1 mark for your angle of inclination. And then if this was on quadrant 2 greater than 90 degrees, this side slanted this side, or a decreasing or a negative gradient, then we will be saying 180 minus that 45 grade 12. In this case, because it's an increasing function, it's a positive gradient, then we end up here. But if the gradient is negative, the line will be a decreasing line. Then we continue and say 180 minus 45. Then it will give you the angle in that particular quadrant. And then number 5, now determine the equation of the line passing through A and B. If we need an equation of the line, what do we need, grade 12? We need a gradient and a point that lie on that particular line. So we are taking line AB here. That means we need a gradient of AB. This will be equals to 1 from number 3, okay? And then we need a point that is on that particular graph. You can take any point, either A or B, grade 12, it will give you the correct answer. Now we use y is equal to mx plus c. If we have chosen point A, 1n minus 4, then we say this is x and y, and then y will be negative 4. The gradient is 1, x is equal to 1 plus c, then c will be equal to a negative 5. So your equation will be y equal to x, 1x for gradient minus 5. Remember now, when you note down your equation, you leave the x and y now. You substitute the value of c and the gradient. Our gradient is 1. We know there's a 1 there even if we don't write it, okay? And then let's see this particular learner now. We decided to use point B, minus 2 and minus 7, and see whether can we end up with the same answers. In the same equation, y equal to mx plus c, our y is minus 7 equals to gradient is 1, value of x is minus 2, and then now plus c. Let's see now. Minus 7 plus 2, that is a minus 5. Can you see you get the same c value of which is minus 5 when you are using the other point? So it doesn't matter, grade 1, as long as that point is on the same line, you can use any point. Okay, let's continue. And then there are terminologies that we are using under this topic. We have the point of origin. Point of origin is where the x-axis and the y-axis intersect on your Cartesian plane, where the point is 0, 0. We call that point a point of origin. And then now we have a gradient. I've already talked to this one. It's a slope or the steepness of a line of which we have just calculated with y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We have the angle of inclination, of which is the angle a line makes with the positive x-axis. We have the word coordinates. That is the paired set of numbers that specify location of a point. and then it is always written as x and y coordinate. Okay, x and y coordinate. And then we have the midpoint. Midpoint is the middle point between 2 points. If I'm having point A up from point A to point B, then in the middle of this, I will be having my middle point, of which you call it midpoint, all right? And then the length is the measure of something from end to end. That means if I'm measuring from A to B here, I'm taking the length of AB. That is the distance or the length from one point to another. And the distance is the length of space between two numbers. That means this explanation explains one and the same thing. And then now let's look at example number 1 now. We are trying to take the exam type questions creators. The diagram shows A, 0, and 4. The first thing, you ensure that all what is given to you is indicated on the diagram. The B value is -7 and 0. The C value is -5 and -4. The D value is 3 and -2. And these are the vertices of the quadrilateral ABCD. A quadrilateral is a four-sided figure. Remember your quad, the four-sided figure, okay? And E is the midpoint. E is the midpoint. That means it is cutting CE exactly equal to ED, is the middle point of C and D. Number 1.1, determine the length of AB and leave your answer in set form. So grade 12, it is better to crop them out then and then bring them closer here, the coordinates that you'll be working with, so that you do not mix them up. So this is -7 and 0. And then we are looking at the length. The length is distance. So we are looking at the distance formula. AB is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus the y2 minus y1 squared. And then now we need to substitute. That is your x1, your y1, your x2, your y2. Let's substitute grade 12. Square root of what is x2? -7. x1, 0, therefore it's -0 squared. Plus y2, y2 is 0, minus y1, y1 is 4. And this is squared. When you are at this stage, grade 12, you can just put everything into your calculator straight to the answer. Remember, we are leaving our answer into set form. What is a set form? Is an answer with the square root or a cube root sign, right? In this case, we are working with square root, then we'll leave our answer in that particular square root 65. And then we have allocation of marks is 2. It's 1 mark for substituting into the correct formula correctly. And then the second mark is for your answer. That is your 2 marks grade 12. And then now the diagram. Okay, we are still on the same diagram. Now the second question, we are determining the coordinates of E. E is that point of which we have indicated that it is cutting the 2 into 2 equal halves, of which is the midpoint of CD. Then we are going to look at the midpoint of CD. So we know the equation is x2 plus x1 over 2, coordinating with y2 plus y1 over 2. Remember grade 12, the tip I have given to you that bring down whatever you'll be busy with. The C is -5 and -4. And then we also need the D, which is 3 and -2. And then we need x1 and y1 and x2, y2. Then this will be x1, y1, and the x2 and the y2 then. Now let's do our substitution now into our equation. The x2 is equals to 3 plus x1. We are adding these 2 now. Then it will be, because it is negative, it will come with that negative, okay, because we are just adding positive times the negative, the negative. And the y2, we have -2, y1 is -4. Bring it as it is, grade 12. There we are. And then now into your calculator, straight to the answer. 3 minus 5 is -2 divided by 2. That is a -1. okay? 3 minus 5 is minus 2, which is minus 1. Minus 2 minus 4 minus 6 divided by 2, that is a minus 3. Can you see now? You must also check within your calculation where the dots lie. Is it correct to have a coordinate as being -1 and -3? That is 100% correct according to this. That means this is -1, and then somewhere here you are having a -3. Can you see it is between -2 and 4? That means your accuracy is 100% the correct, grade 12. So that is 2 marks, 1 mark for substitution, 1 mark for the correct coordinate simplified then. And then 1.3, determine the gradient of AD. Now we need A and D then. Okay, let's bring it down here. A coordinate is 0 and 4. And then we need also coordinate of D, which is 3 and -2. Can you see, grade 12? It will help you not to select wrong things now. So we are looking at the gradient with symbol M of AG is equal to the formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Name your family, family 1, x1, y1. The next family, family 2, x2, y2. And then now let's substitute into the formula. What is the y2? Minus 2 minus the y1 is 4. And then x2 is 3 minus from the formula, x1 is 0. And then into your calculator, grade 12, to the answer is -6 over 3, of which is a -2. Now you also compare your gradient here. The gradient is negative. Check the line, is it a decreasing line? Yes, we are 100% correct, because the gradient is corresponding with the line that is a decreasing line. The gradient is negative. Substitution into the formula, 1 mark, and your answer is another mark, of which this is 2 marks, grade 12. And then determine the size of beta now. Beta is that angle from the x-axis anti-clockwise to line AB. Since it is touching line AB, that means we need the gradient of line AB that we have just calculated above as a -2, grade 12, okay? So we need a gradient of AB. We have just calculated that it is -2 above. This was supposed to be a hands question because you are using your previous answer. And then now we want to calculate size beta. Do you still remember the equation of angle of inclination? It will be tan beta now, because our angle is beta, equals to the gradient M of AB. And then that is the tan of beta. Substitute the gradient -2. And then now we have, if it is grade 12, do not misinterpret this. Sometimes you might see this as being in quadrant 1 and think that the angle is less than 90. No. You look at the slanting of your line. Look at this. If my Cartesian plane I shift it to here, can you see that it's in quadrant 2? It is more than 90 degrees. Therefore, we are referring to that, not the particular quadrant we are in. Do not confuse the two. So our beta then will be equal to arctan of 2 now. This negative is indicating that we are going where tangent is negative, of which is quadrant 2. This negative indicates second quadrant. So now we are going to have the reference beta, not yet our solution. And then now if you check your reference beta on this one, grade 12, you find that the value of your beta is 63,43 degrees. Now we need the actual beta in second quadrant. It will be, your answer will be beta 180 degrees minus the 63,43 degrees, of which give us 116,57 degrees. Can you see that, grade 12? If the gradient is negative, you continue. If it is positive, you stop there. Right, increasing and decreasing function. And then that is why look at the mark allocation. It is also telling you that you are doing more on this one. And then now the first mark will be for the correct gradient substituted there. Second mark for the reference angle. The third mark for bringing in 180 minus quadrant there. And then the last mark for the correct answer on that particular quadrant. Hence, this is 4 marks. And then now we are determining the equation of the line AD. We are still on line AD. We do have a gradient of that line. We have calculated above as -2. And then now AD, remember, it lies between A and D there. So you can choose any point greater. So let's say now this learner choose A, then uses the equation mx plus c. Then this particular learner will have x and y there. Y will be 4, m is -2, the x is 0 plus c. And then this will be 4, -2, this will be 0, -2 times 0 is 0, plus c. Therefore, c is equals to m, 4. Then your equation for this one will be y, you leave y, you substitute m, -2, you leave x, you substitute c, that is positive 4. That is the equation of that line. Okay. And then let's say the other learner decided to use equation y minus y1 equal to m over x minus x1. Let's see what will happen. And then this will be your x1 and y1. So this will be y minus y1 is 4 equal to gradient is the same. And then this is x minus x1 is 0. And then this will give us y minus 4 equal to -2x minus 2 times 0, 0. And then y is equal to -2x. And then you take -4 to this side, it's a +4. Can you see grade 12? We have exactly the same equation. And then let's say another learner decided to use D now for the point with the equation y mx plus c. Let's see now, this will be our x and y. Y will be -2, the gradient is the same. And then we substitute 3 there plus c. Then this is -2, -2 times 3 is -6 plus c. And then we transpose 6 to the side. And then now it will be +6 minus 2, which is 4. Then c will be equal to 4. Can you see you get the same c value there, of which is the same as that one. So now choose wisely grade 12, the one that you see it's easier for you. And then now 1 mark will go for substitution into the equation. And then to find the value of c, the last mark will be for your equation grade 12. The same applies here for the substitution and for the equation. Substitution and for the equation. It doesn't matter which method you use, grade 12s. And then now, here we start with your activity. On everything we have done with you now, I want to see now, can you apply the information that we have done with you above to answer this question? We are given the diagram that shows vertices R, S, and T on the diagram there. The angle of inclination of RT with the positive x-axis is theta, as indicated the grade 12s. And then they say U is the midpoint of ST. RU is drawn. Determine the length of RU. And then you leave your answer in that form. I am giving you grade 12 2 minutes to do this problem. And then we will reflect back. Your 2 minutes start now. Okay, great, Charles. Let's see whether did you manage to get that 2 marks. Right, and then we are looking at the length of RU. So we need to bring R and U closer. The coordinates of R is 2 and 1. And the coordinates of U, we are having 1 and -4. This will assist you a lot, grade 12. And this will be your x1, your y1, and then your x2 and your y2. Then you can go to your formula. We are looking for RU distance. This will be equal to the square root of x2 minus x1. Copy your formula correct, grade 12. And then y2 minus y1 squared. And then substitution now, square root is also there, still there. And then x2 is 1 minus x1 is 2 squared plus y2 is -4 minus y1 is 1 squared. And then after substitution, grade 12, just put everything into your calculator straight to the answer. It will give you the square root of 26. Leave your answer inside form. Do not press the SD button to simplify there. And then that is for substitution and the answer. Easy, grade 12. I hope you got that one correct. Let's see now with the next activity now. With activity 2 now, we are still on activity 1, 1.2. Determine the values of x and y. And then if you look at y is on point S, that is there on your diagram. And then t with coordinate x and -5, that is your t. And then now remember we are given that u is the midpoint of those two coordinate points. Okay, now grade 12, please do this for me. I am giving you 3 minutes to do that one. Your 3 minutes start now. Okay, graders, let's see now how far did it go. Remember our WhatsApp number 079-578-2908. You can share your alternative solutions to that number or any clarity seeking questions to that particular number, right? Here we need to determine the value of x and y, and then now when we check the x and y, we can see that x is on t and y is on s. And when you look at our statement, it says u is the midpoint of st. So that means now our answer will come out of that given statement. Okay, so now we'll say the s, okay, let's say we have s coordinate, which is minus 2 and y. And then now we have the middle point being u, coordinate 1 and minus 4. And then we have t, of which coordinate is x and minus 5. Then remember, this will be your x1 and your y1, and the x2 and your y2. And then this one, because it's the middle point, it will be x middle, midpoint, and the y mid. Okay. Now, remember, Greta, when you look into your formula sheet, it is having the formula m for midpoint into x2 plus x1 over 2, coordinating with y2 plus y1 over 2. Now, in this case, now we need the y value and the x value. If we are given that condition, please separate this and say the x of midpoint will be the x2 plus x1 over 2. And also the y midpoint will be equal to the y2 plus y1 over 2. Separately, great job now, separately. This will work for you, because if you try to substitute everything on that formula, you'll never win. Okay. So now we have x mid. What is x mid? 1 equals to the x2 is x plus x1. Our x1 is minus 2 all over 2. And then you cross multiply this 2 to that 1, it will be 1 times 2, of which is 2. On the right hand side, you have x minus 2. And therefore, x will be equal to transpose negative 2 to that 1. It becomes the 2 plus 2, of which will be 4. Then your x value will be equal to 4. Can you see how easy it is now without doing it on that congested formula? And then now let's look at the y mid now. The y mid is equal to negative 4. The y2 is equal to negative 5. And then the y1 is equal to y, equals to divide by 2. And then you cross multiply 2 to minus 4, that is a minus 8. 4 times negative 2. 2 times negative 4, negative 8. And then we have minus 5 plus y. And then you transpose 5 to the side, it will be minus 8 plus 5, of which is minus 3, equals to y. Therefore, our coordinate, our x values now, x is 4, so t coordinates here actually, it is what? x4 and the minus 5. The s coordinate here is minus 2 with a negative 3. Let's look at the positioning, whether are we correct. The x value is positive 4, yes, it is positive. And the y value is a negative 3, yes, it is negative. Happy, great chance. And then now let's allocate marks. It's 1 for substitution, 1 for the answer, 1 substitution, 1 for the answer. Therefore, this is 4 marks. And the next activity, great child, 1.3 for you. I am giving you 2 minutes. You are calculating only the gradient of RT for this one. Your 2 minutes starts now. Okay, grade 12s, let's see now. Have you collected these 2 marks, grade 12s? Remember, analytical is the easiest topic that can give us marks on paper 2. And then here now we determine the gradient of RT. Let's check RT. R is that point, and the T is that one. Do you still remember now T? We have just calculated the value of X on the previous question. Grade 12, can you see the importance of being correct? Because if that T is incorrect, that means it's going to affect this answer now. So we are having our R, which is 2 and 1. And then now we have T from the previous solution. We said this X is 4. Then it will be 4 coordinating with -5. And then this will be your X1, your Y1, and your X2 and your Y2. So we are looking at the gradient now. We need the formula for the gradient of RT is equal to Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. And then let's substitute now. What is Y2? -5 minus from the formula. And then what is Y1? 1. And then our X2 is 4 minus from the formula. And then our X1 is 2. And then this is equal to -6 over 2, grade 12. How much is -6 over 2? That is M minus 3. That is the gradient of RT. So now grade 12, the mistake that you do on this question is you write this gradient wrong. Gradient of a formula, you start with the X2 plus minus X1 on top, and then you bring Y2 minus Y1 on the denominator. That is incorrectly. The other mistake that you do, you say Y2 plus Y1 over X2 plus X1. That is wrong, because this is a minus formula, and then with the Y on top and the denominator X. Change in Y over the change in X. And then now 1 for substitution and 1 for the gradient of that particular line. And then now let's look at the gradient. It's a negative gradient compared to your line. It's a decreasing line. Therefore, this is correct now to be a negative gradient, because the decreasing line is having a negative gradient, grade 12. Okay, let's move to another activity, 1.4. In this case, you are determining the size of theta. Look at theta now. It is more than 90 degrees. That means we are also depending on the gradient of RT that we have just calculated above, and indicated that gradient of RT is -3. And then now if the gradient is negative, grade 12, do you still remember what I'm going to do now with your inclination angle? That is why we are having more marks, 3 marks for that one. Your 2 minutes start now, grade 12. Work out that size of theta. Okay, great job. Let's see now. Let's see how far did you go with this one. We have a gradient m of RT is minus 3. Okay, and if you look at this angle, it's an angle of inclination. Therefore, we are taking the equation tan theta is equal to m. In this case, we refer to m of RT because now this angle touches that line, okay? Line RT is with reference to line RT. Now we substitute the gradient, then you have the tan of theta equals to -3. But remember, this negative is saying to you, you are going to work in the second quadrant. That means it's where you are having your 180 minus reduction, okay? Then it will be minus your reference in this case. Okay, grade 12, I hope you understand this part now. And then now let's continue. We are looking at the reference angle of theta, and then this is arctan of +3 because negative is indicating the quadrant. And then when you look at the arctan of theta here, we end up with 71,57 as our reference angle there. Continue. We are looking at the real value of theta now. It will be this reference now 180 minus the reference of 71,57 in quadrant 2. Reduction. 180 minus, this is giving us 108,43 degrees. So grade 12, that is our theta value, of which is more than 90 degrees. As you can also see that your line is slanted this side. If it was less than 90, it will be on the other side. And then it's 1 mark for showing the gradient substitution in inclination formula, the 2nd mark for the reference angle, and the 3rd mark for your actual angle value then. And then right, let's continue now. We are looking at the application now in other ways of asking, or the application of whatever we have done grade 12 to answer other triangles and polygons using that information. And then in this case now we are given that we need to determine the perimeter of triangle PQR. And then you need to understand what is perimeter. Perimeter is the distance around the shape. So now we want the distance of this triangle PQR, distance around triangle PQR. And then we are given coordinates P, 2 and 3, and then Q is 3 and minus 2, and then R is minus 2 and 3. If we try to predict the shape of that particular triangle, we are in 1, 2 coordinate with 3, 1, 2, 3 there. That is the first point there. And then now that is point P. For point Q, you are having 3 coordinating with minus 2, 3, and then you have a point there, 3 and minus 2. And then you have a -2 coordinating with -3 now. And then that gives us a point there. That means we are having a triangle like that one. Okay, great. At least you have a picture of what you are having now. You can now start calculating the perimeter. So that means you need to find the distance of, this is Q minus 2 and minus 3 is R, and then this is Q. You need to find the distance PQ, distance QR, distance RP. And then now you add them together, then they will give you the distance around that particular triangle. Can you see now we are applying our distance to solve this problem? So we are going to look at the distance PQ, of which it will be the square root of the x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1. That is the formula of the distance throughout, y2 minus y1. And then the PQ now, we are depending on P and Q. And then now this will be our x1 and y1, x2 and y2 there. Let's substitute now. What is x2? 3 minus x1, 2 squared plus y2, -2 minus 3 squared, and then into our calculator, grade terms, we are having the distance of PQ being square root of 26. Okay, sorry for that. The square root of 26. And then we are done. That is the PQ sign. And then we look for another line. This one is square root 26. Then let's look at QR. It will still use that formula. We are going to substitute on that one. For Q and R now, what is, we are taking Q and R. Okay, let's group them like that. And then we will say this one is family 1, Y1 and X1. So now what is X2? X2 is 3 minus X1, it's a negative 2, then it will be positive 2 plus, and then the Y2 is negative 2 minus Y1, it will be negative positive 3 squared. And then into your calculator, grade 12 to the answer. This is also giving you square root of 26. The QR is also the square root of 26. Can you see these two sides are equal? What type of a triangle is that one, grade 12? If the two sides are equal, that is an isosceles triangle. But let's check before we decide whether the third line is different. If the third line is the same, that means this is equilateral. All sides are equal. Up to this part now, we have concluded only 2. If it's only 2, that means it's isosceles triangle. And then let's look at PR now, the last distance that we are looking for, this side. And then now the PR, we are using the same formula. We are now substituting the P and R. Let's bring the coordinates here so that we don't do any mistake. We need P and R. We can change our labeling now and say X1, Y1, and this one will become X2, the Y2. It doesn't mean you have to stick to that one, grade 12. You can change around. But the one family must be 1, both of them. The second family, if it is X2, also Y must be 2. You can't swap them around. Okay. And then now let's substitute. X2 is minus 2, and then minus from the formula, the X1 is 2, and then this is squared plus the Y2, negative 3, and then minus the 3 from Y1. And then now into your calculator, grade 12, straight to the answer. This is giving us 2 square root of 13. Happy it is not the same as that one. So our answer remains that this is an isosceles triangle. Why? Because two sides are equal. So PR will be 2 square root 13. Remember, now we have calculated the values of all the sides separately, but we have not yet addressed the question. We need the perimeter. Distance around triangle PQR. The distance will be what now? Will be the PQ square root 26 for PQ plus the square root 26 for QR plus the 2 square root 13 for the PR. And then this is giving us the total of 17,412 to 2 decimal places, and then units because the units are not given to us. Okay, let's look at the mark allocation. This is 4 marks. 1 mark will be for the first distance, second mark, second distance, third mark for the third distance. The 4th mark is for adding all the distances to 17,413 grade 12. So this problem with 4 marks. That means now we are now applying our distances that we have learned from our previous activities. Okay, let's continue. 2.2. They say determine the value or values of K if the length of the line joining point S and T is square root of 80. That means we are given a length between these two. And then it is given as 80, square root of 80. They say find the value of K. Can you see now? We need to apply distance formula to find the unknown because they need that value of K. So you need to analyze your question with understanding, grade 12. They talk to the length, is given to us. That means we are relying on the distance formula. Length and distance, they use the same formula. Now, let's see now. We have 2 points, S and T. We will be working with these two. At least in this case, we have only 2 points. And this will be our x1, y1 is fine, and the x2 and the y2 there. Right, we are having now distance ST is equal to the square root of the x2 plus x minus x1, minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. But the distance, the length joining this is given as square root of 80. So we'll substitute square root of 80 for ST, and then equals to the x2 now. Let's look at our x2. Or x2 is k minus the x1, of which is 2 squared, plus y2, it's 5, minus the y1, which is negative 3. It will cause this to be positive, and then this is squared. And then grade 12, you need to apply your algebraic simplification of equations now to solve this problem. Okay. And then now we can say we square both sides to get rid of the square root sign. And then the 2 will cancel, the square root will be left with 80. And the 2 will also cancel the square root sign, you'll be left with the bracket. So with the bracket, you have k minus 2. It's like you are multiplying 2 bracket of k minus 2. Okay, there's a short method of saying that. You say k times k squared. K times minus 2k times 2 minus 4k minus 2 squared plus 4. Or you can do it with distributive k times k squared. K times minus 2k minus 2 times k minus 2k. And negative 2 times the negative 2 is a plus 4. So you add like terms, that is minus 4k plus 4. Can you see grade 12 is exactly the same as the one we have then? So you square the first term, multiply the first by the second by 2, and then you square the last term. And then now let's see the second bracket. Now you have 5 plus 3, which is 8. 8 squared is equal to 64. Okay, and then from here now we can start adding like terms, grade 12. We are having, or we take 0 this side, and then we have k squared minus 4k, and then this 2 will give us a 68, and then we bring 80 to that side, it will be minus 80. Let's see, we have We have 80 to the side, 64 plus 4, that is 68. And then the 8 to the side, it is minus an 80 there. So we end up with k squared minus 4k. And then we have 80 minus the 68, that will be 10 minus 8 is 2. And then 7 minus 6 is 1. And then we have negative 12 there, okay? And then now we need to factorize this. We are looking for factors of 12. When you subtract, you get a 4, that will be k minus 6 and the k plus 2, okay? So the first k will be equal to 6, or the second k will be equal to a negative 2, grade 12. Right. It says value or values of k. That is why we end up with 2 solutions then. So now let's look at mark allocation. We have 4 marks then. The first mark will be substitution into the correct formula, or substituting correct your value of the distance and the values of x and y. Second mark will be for the correct quadratic trinomial then. The third mark will be for correct factors of that trinomial. The fourth mark will be for the correct k values then. Then we are having possibility of 2 values as our answer there. Then this is worth 4 marks. And then now we have the activity here. Let's do it together, grade 12. We are determining the values of k if the distance between point A is 2 and minus 2, and B is k and minus 8, and then this is equal to the square root of 52. And the second one, you need to determine the value of x and y if you're given a midpoint now, and the line is joining D and E. I hope this is now becoming familiar to you, grade 12. Let's start with 2.1. We are given the distance similar to the previous activity, and this will be your x1 and y1, the x2 and y2 there. And then now we have distance AB for 2.1, of which is the square root of what, grade 12? The x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And then what is AB? Square root of 52 equal to the square root of x2 is k minus x1, 2 squared. We are substituting from here. And then plus the y2, negative 8, minus from the formula, and then y1 comes with the negative, this will be positive 2, and then squared all over in the square root then. And then to get rid of the square root, you still remember grade 12, you need to square both sides. You'll end up with 52. Remove the brackets. This will cancel the square root sign. So it will be k times k squared. K times minus 2 minus 2k times 2 minus 4k. Minus 2 squared plus 4. You square the first term, you multiply the first by the second by the exponent, and then you square the last term. And then in the bracket here we have minus 8 plus 2, minus 8 plus 2 is minus 6. Minus 6 squared is 36. And then now 0 to this side. Now we are adding like terms, grade 12 on the right hand side. We have k squared minus 4k, and then 4 plus 36 is a 40 plus 40, and then we bring 52 to the side, it will be minus 52. And then we end up with k squared minus 4k. The 40 minus 52 is minus 12. And then factors of 12, when you add them, you get negative 4. That will be kk. And then 12 is 6 and 2. And then 6 is negative and 2 positive. Therefore, k is equal to 6, or k is equal to a negative 2. So allocation of marks is 5 marks for this one. That means this examiner is giving a mark for substitution there, and the mark for substituting the square root of 52. And the mark for the trinomial, mark for factors, and mark for your answer. That is worth 5 marks. And then with the 2.2 then, you are determining the value of x and y. Remember, if you are doing that, looking for that, and you are given midpoint, the tip that I've given you is that grade 12, separate them, okay, into x mid is equal to x2 plus x1 over y, and the y mid equal to y2 plus y1 over 2. And then now you can start with your substitution now. This one will be your x1 and y1, and then x2 and your y2 there. Let's substitute. And this one will be your x mid and your y mid, because they said it's a midpoint, right? Right. X mid is 1, x2 3, plus x1, that is plus x over 2. And then let's deal with the x, and then we'll go to y. That is 2 times 1, which is equals to 2. Then you are left with 3 plus x this side. And then we transpose 3 to this side. X will be equal to 2 minus 3, of which is minus 1. And then with the y mid, now let's substitute. Y midpoint is minus 2, equal to the y2 is y, and then the y1 is minus 5 all over 2. Cos 2 to that 1 is minus 2 times 2 minus 4, and then you have y minus 5. Therefore, your y value will be equal to -4 plus 5 of which is 1. So that is your y value for that. So that is the values of x and y. And then this is allocated 4 marks, grade 12. 1 will be for substitution and 1 for the answer. 1 substitution and 1 for the answer. Then this problem is worth how many? 4 marks. Okay, move on. And then here we need, we are given A, B, C, D, and then they say calculate the value of K in each case. If condition number 1, you are given that AB is equal to CD. Can you see now you are applying a gradient to solve other problems? Here we are given that line AB is parallel to line CD. If that is the case, we are relying on the gradient of the two lines, because now we know from the previous application that the gradient of AB will be equal to the gradient of CD. Why? Because these two lines are parallel. And then what is M of AB now will depend on AB on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side, you look at CD then. So this will serve as x1, y1, and x2, y2 for the left-hand side. And this one will serve x1, y1, and x2, y2 for the right-hand side. Okay? Now, let's continue now, grade 12. Remember the formula for the gradient, that is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 for AB, and the y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 for CD. Okay, this is for AB and this is for CD. Now let's substitute AB. Our y2 is -5. Our y1 is 1. Our x2 is k. Our x1 is -2. Then it will be minus from the formula and the minus from 2. Then that is +2. On the right-hand side, we now go for CD coordinates. The y2 is 7 minus y1 6. x2 minus 2, x1 4. And then now grade 12, we have now substituted everything. Can you see you have that k that you need to find using that information? And then we are going to simplify. There we have -5 minus 1 is -6 over k plus 2 equal to 7 minus 6 of which is 1. And then -2 minus 4 is -6. So now we need to cross multiply to solve for k. We are going to cross -6 times -6. That will be positive 36. And then k plus 2 times 1, that is k plus 2. And the next step, we transpose 2 to that side. That will be k is equal to 36 minus 2, that is 32. That is the value of k if AB is parallel to CD. And the mark allocation, there is 4 marks. The first mark will be for showing us that the two gradients are equal for that condition. And then secondly, for substituting into both sides. The third mark for simplification, and the final one for the answer there. That is your 4 marks allocation, grade 12 for 2.3.1. And then 2.3.2, you are given AB is perpendicular to CD. What do you know about the perpendicular lines? Their gradient, the product of their gradient is equal to -1. That simply means the gradient of AB multiplied by the gradient of CD is equal to a -1. Okay, we are still going to rely on that AB and the CD. Okay, so now let's substitute grade 12. We can even take it from there, because it will give us the same answer for AB, which is -6 over k plus 2. Multiply M of CD is giving us 1 minus 1 over 6 equals to -1. Okay, and then 6 goes once and then goes once there. On top, we are having a negative times a negative, which is +1 over denominator k plus 2. equals to a -1. And then now we have 1 is equal to -1. We are crossing this k plus 2 to that one. It will be cross multiplication, -1 times k plus 2. So this is 1. Remove the bracket. That will be -k and -2. So we will take k to this side so that it becomes positive k, and take 1 to this side, and then it will be -2 minus 1, of which is -3. Therefore, if these two lines are perpendicular, the value of k is now changing to a -3 because the conditions are not the same, grade 12. So the first mark is to show us if we are having perpendicular lines, the gradient will be -1. That is the first mark. The second mark is for substitution of the two gradients, and then for the y2, y1, x2, x1 for both of them. And the third mark is for simplifying. The last one is for the answer, grade 12. Hence, this is 4 marks. And then the next one, determine the angle of inclination of the line MN. MN is that line, and then can you see that they have continued the dotted line to show that the inclination will be there. And if you look at this inclination, it's a decreasing line. That means it's the one that is giving us 180 minus, because the gradient is negative, grade 12. But before we do that, we must start by calculating that gradient, because we do not have, using the point M and N there. So we are using point M, -1 and -1, and the point N, which is 5 and 4. And then this will serve as our x1 and y1, and the x2 and y2. So we will start by finding the gradient of Mn, because we need that for inclination. So Mn, no one will tell you, grade 12, that you need that. When you must analyze the question and check now. If I need an inclination, that means I need a gradient. Do I have a gradient? No. Can I calculate it? Yes, because I'm having 2 points. It's only then that you will know that you need to calculate a gradient first. And then now this will be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And the y2 is 4 minus y1 is a negative from the formula and negative from the value of y1, and this will be +1 over the x2 is 5, and then minus from the formula, a negative from x1 will cause positive here, and then this is 1. And then we are having 5 over 6 as our gradient there. Okay, this will give us, okay, this is -4. Sorry, grade 12, this is 5 and negative. We missed the negative there. This is 5 and -4. Let's correct that one then. We are having -4 plus 1 on top. Yes, then this will be correct now. This is -3 over 6, which is -1 over 2. Simple fraction. You can just put this part into your calculator. It will take you there. Okay. Now, remember, we are looking for an inclination, not the gradient. So we need to continue from there and have now the tan theta is equal to M of that line, MN. And then now we have the tan of theta. We are substituting the gradient of MN is -1 over 2. This negative, remember, it is telling you that is 180 minus, correct? Okay, then now this will be the reference angle of theta now, of which is arctan of half. Look at that half, it is positive half, and then this is giving us 26,57 degrees there. And then now we move to the actual value of theta. Now it will be 180 minus the 26,57 degrees, of which is giving you how much, Rachel? 153,43 degrees. Okay, and then now let's look at the mark allocation. It will be for substitution of gradient. Finding the gradient is equals to -1/2. The third mark will go for the inclination substitution of gradient. The reference angle for the fourth mark and the last mark will be for your real actual value of theta there. Hence, this problem worth how much? 5 marks, grade 12. Okay, now 2.5. Calculate the gradient of a line with inclination 45. In this case, we are given inclination. You need a gradient. So the minute you see inclination, the formula is tan of theta equal to the gradient of that particular line that you are looking for. In this case, you are given the inclination. What is inclination now? Is 45 degrees. And then into your calculator, grade 12, this will give you 1. Then the gradient of that line is equals to positive 1. That is your 2.5. And then now mark allocation is 2 marks. 1 mark will be substitution of 45 into the correct inclination formula. The second mark will be for your gradient. There you are. You have your 2.5 solution. For 2.6, determine the equation of a line with the gradient 3. M is equals to 3, the gradient of that line. And the line is passing through point -1 and 2. And then determine the equation. You know, grade 12, it will be y equal to mx plus c. Then this will serve as our x and y. Y is 2. Gradient is 3, x is -1 plus c. This will be 2. 3 times -1 is -3 plus c. Therefore, c will be 2 plus 3, and then which it will be +5. Therefore, the equation is y. We substitute m, that is 3x. We substitute c, that is +5. Or another learner may use that formula of y minus y1 equal to m into x minus x1. And then now substituting this as x1, y1, then it will be y minus 2, and the gradient 3 into x minus will be +1. And then we have y minus 2, we are multiplying 3 in here. It will be 3 times x, which is 3x, 3 times 1, which is 3. And then we transpose -2 to this side, you'll end up with a y only on the left. And then we have 3x on the right. -2 to the right will be +2. So +2 plus 3 is a +5. Can you see, grade 12? We have exactly the same equation. It doesn't matter which formula we use as long as you use it correct. And then let's look at the mark allocation. It will be for the substitution part. And then the second mark for simplifying, and then for the answer. Okay, this side it will be allocated here, substitution, the value of C, and the equation. So this is worth 3 marks, grade 12. And then now the next activity there, 2.7, determine the equation of the line passing through. Grade 12, can you see we are unfolding different types of finding equation of a straight line? You must be able to do all of them, okay? Determine the equation of a line. This is passing through those 2 points. You know that if we need the equation of a line, we need what? A gradient and a point. And then if you look at this, yes, we do have 2 points, but we don't have a gradient. So now we are going to rely on these points to find the gradient, okay? So this will serve as xy and y1, and your x2 and your y2 there. So we go to the gradient of that particular line. It will be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, what is y2? y2 is 3 minus y1, of which is 3. Look at what is happening, grade 12. And then we have denominator x2 is 1 minus 5, it will be +5. On top we are having 0, and then denominator 6. The gradient is 0. Okay, and then that means now this line, let's check what is happening now when we put coordinate on a Cartesian plane and try, because there's no gradient there. Can you see that our gradient is 0? Right, now let's predict what is happening here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that is -5, coordinating with +3 there. Then you have a point there. And then also, and then this is 2.7, and then it's 2 marks for y. Other learners can see that by just looking at 3, that y is equal to 3. But for answer only, we will give 2 marks. But for showing, we will give 1 for showing and 1 for the y value there. Others can show in a diagram like this one, then it is fine, grade 12. Any method, it's okay with us, as long as it is mathematically correct. 2.8, determine the equation of a line. We are still on equation of a line. We need a gradient and a point, okay? And then that is perpendicular to this graph. And then it is passing through -6. We do have a point. Our point is -6 and 2. Do we have a gradient? No, but it is given that it is perpendicular to that one. Remember now the product of the perpendicular line 1, line 2, when you multiply them, they give you -1. So if this line, the gradient of this one is 1/2, then in this case, we'll divide by half both sides. The gradient of that line will be just a -2. Can you see what is happening, grade 12? It's a reciprocal of that one with a negative sign. Happy? Therefore, the gradient of that line now, it will be just a -2. Then we can go y mx plus c. And then our y, this is x and y, y2, gradient -2, x -6 plus c. Then this is 2. -2 times -6 is +12. And then we have c there. We take 12 to this side, it will be -12 plus 2, which is -10, equal to c. Therefore, the equation is y, substitute m, -2x, substitute c, -10. That is our equation for that particular information. 1 mark for identifying the gradient, 2nd mark for substitution correctly into the correct formula, the last mark for giving us the actual equation of that particular problem. And then the last 2 activities for the day, grade 12, we are still determining the equation of a line. And this line is parallel to this one, and it is passing through 6 and 4. Do we have a gradient? We can have it from the word parallel because we have something that is parallel to that. And therefore, let's start there. We are given y equal -3x is equals to -4. And then this will be y transpose in a standard form, mx plus c. It will be 3x minus 4. Happy now, we can identify the gradient is equals to 3. Remember, when you are having parallel lines, the gradient are exactly equal. Therefore, this gradient will also be the gradient for that particular line, of which the line is passing through 6 and 4. So it's y equal to mx plus c. And then this is our x and y. Y is 4, m is 3, x 6 plus c. And then we have 4. 3 times 6, 6, 12, 18 plus c. We transpose 18 to the side. It will be 4 minus 18, of which is minus 14 equals to c. So our actual equation, therefore, will be y equal to substitute m, 3x, substitute c, -14. That is the equation of that line. 1 mark for identifying the gradient is the same. 2nd mark for substituting. The last mark is for the correct formula for that. Last activity, 2.10, grade 12. We are still on an equation of a line. And then this line is passing through -2 and 5. Happy, we have a point -2 and 5 because we need a gradient and a point to find the equation. And we have inclination 135. Wow, we will be able to find the gradient because now we need a gradient. We will use this inclination now. Let's find the gradient, grade 12. Tan theta is equal to the gradient. Do you still remember inclination formula? What is our inclination? Is tan of 135 degrees equals to m. And then now we want to find the value of m. This will be tan 135 is -1. If we have m, we have a point of which will be our x and y. we can go y is equal to mx plus c. What is y? 5. Gradient, -1, x, -2 plus c. 5, -1 times -2, 2 plus c. Therefore, c is equal to 5 minus 2, that is 3. So the equation of this line will be therefore y equal to, substitute m, -1, x, substitute c, that is 3 plus 3. Grade 12. Therefore, that is the equation of that particular line. And then this is your homework, grade 12. You can take it with you and do it at your own time. And then it is all based on whatever we have done today with you. Just check, can you manage to answer all these questions? Therefore, you will be 100% ready for paper 2 in analytical grade 11. So on the summary of everything that we have done today, we did the analytical geometry, of which is plus minus 25 out of your 150 paper. We have done the distance and the application, the gradient and the application of gradient, determining the midpoint and the application, determining the equation of a straight line given different conditions, where you are given an inclination, given 2 points, given a gradient and a point, given a perpendicular line and a point, given the parallel line and the point. So you must be able to answer all of them. And then given an angle of inclination to find a gradient, given a gradient to find the angle of inclination, of which the inclination we are working only in quadrants 1 and 2, grade 12 to find that. That is the summary to everything that we have done today. And then now we will be having our next session again next week on the 27th of August from 2:30 to 4 o'clock, of which we will be looking again at analytical geometry, but our focus will be on grade 12 part, of which is talking the analytical geometry of a circle together with your ellipse, grade 12. Thank you very much. See you then. This lesson was brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saibono Discovery Center. I thank you.